There's a political earthquake rumbling beneath the surface of American politics. It has nothing to do with the talking heads on cable news or the daily outrage cycle on social media. It's the sound of footsteps, millions of them, walking away, not necessarily towards the other side, but into a political wilderness of their own making. This is a story of the great unmooring, the demographic shift that has Republican strategists worried about their party's future. The fastest growing group in American politics is not Democrat or Republican. They are independents, and they're building a voting bloc so massive it could single-handedly decide the next election. For decades, the American political map has been defined by two colors, red and blue, a predictable tug-of-war between two opposing forces. But that binary is collapsing. The share of Americans identifying as politically independent has been on the rise for years, hitting a record-tying 43% in 2024, with some polls showing it's as high as 51% at certain points throughout the year. At that same time frame, both Republicans and Democrats were both polling at just 28% each. This isn't just a group of undecideds waiting to be swayed by the next 30-second ad. This is a fundamental realignment of the American voter. And for the Republican Party, the numbers suggest it's becoming a challenge that it can't afford to ignore. The Great Unmooring, the rise of the independent voter, is one of the most important, yet least understood, stories in American politics. These voters aren't just moderates either. They are liberals, conservatives, and everything in between, united by a core belief. The current system isn't working for them. In surveys, they describe the Republican Party as too extreme by a large margin. This mass departure from party loyalty creates an unpredictable and powerful force. In the 2024 election, independents didn't break decisively for Democrats as they did in 2020. While national exit polls show a near even split, with some indicating a slight edge for Kamala Harris, Donald Trump made significant gains with this group compared to 4 years prior and won independents outright in key battleground states like Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Arizona. This volatility is the new normal. Independents are kingmakers, and their loyalty cannot be taken for granted by either side. But the real alarm bells for the GOP are ringing from a different demographic, one that will define the political landscape for the next 50 years. Generation Z. Young voters are leading a quiet revolution by rejecting rigid partisanship, and their numbers tell the story of a party that risks losing the future before it even arrives. The generation gap becomes a chasm. If you want to see the GOP's demographic nightmare in real time, look no further than the voters under 30. Gen Z has the highest share of independents than any other generation. They aren't just skeptical of the GOP. Their views are often strongly negative. A July 2025 poll, for instance, found President Trump's net approval rating amongst Gen Z voters was a staggering minus 30 points. I'm not laughing, you're laughing. But it's when you slice the data by gender that the chasm truly appears. While the GOP has made inroads with young men, it is hemorrhaging young women. Shocking. This isn't just about feelings, it's about policy. Independents as a whole tend to trust Democrats more on issues like abortion, health care, and climate change. These are the very issues that energize young voters, especially young women. Meanwhile, the GOP's traditional strength lies in areas like economy and immigration. The numbers from mid-2025 show Gen Z voters, after a period of flirting with the GOP in 2024, are all beginning to drift back towards the Democratic Party. While their allegiances are fluid, their default setting is increasingly not Republican. The GOP has lost young voters before, but this feels different. It feels like a structural rejection of what the party has become. What's pushing them away? So what is driving this exodus? It's a complex mix of personality, policy, and fundamental disconnect on the vision for America's future. For many, the influence can be traced to the influence of Donald Trump. His influence didn't just change the GOP. It accelerated the departure of moderates and some independents who just view the party as too extreme. The party's hardline stance on cultural issues is a double-edged sword. While it solidifies supporting from its own base, it's a major liability with the voters it needs to win national elections. This is what political scientists call an ideological realignment. White voters without a college degree have shifted heavily towards the Republican Party, But this has been offset by losses among college-educated voters who are moving towards the Democrats. The problem for the GOP is that the pool of voters that they are alienating is growing, while their core demographic is a shrinking share of the electorate. And then there's the issue of trust. A stunning 70% of independents believe that both parties are too extreme. They feel unheard and unrepresented. Yeah, I know I do. And when they look at the GOP, they see a party that, for many, is more interested in fighting culture wars than solving real-world problems. While older Republicans consistently rank immigration as their top issue, younger Republicans are more focused on the economy. This generational divide over priorities creates a massive challenge for a party trying to build a winning coalition. The GOP's nightmare scenario. Elections are won on the margins. And right now the margins are razor thin. In mid-2025, Gallup polling showed the country almost equally divided, with 46% of Americans identifying as or leaning Democratic and 43% leaning or as Republican. In an environment this polarized, a few percentage points among independents is the difference between a victory and a defeat. The nightmare scenario for the Republican Party is a future that they can no longer compete for the center. If Gen Z's political leanings persist and independents continue to view the party with suspicions, the GOP's path to a national majority becomes incredibly narrow. The party's strength is concentrated among rural voters and white voters, particularly those without a college degree, groups that are a declining share of the overall electorate. The shift in party affiliation after the 2024 election is a canary in the coal mine. After a period where the GOP held an advantage in party preference, the trend reversed in 2025, with more Americans driven entirely by independents beginning to lean towards the Democratic Party. Historically, shifts in party affiliation away from the president's party in the first year can often precede midterm losses. This makes the 2026 midterm elections a critical test. If the GOP cannot reverse this trend, it faces the prospect of becoming a permanent minority party, dominant in deep red states, but unable to build a broad coalition needed to govern the country. This demographic earthquake is reshaping our political map in real time. But this is a conversation that's bigger than data points. Are you an independent voter, or have you considered leaving a political party? What are the issues that matter the most to you? Let me know your story in the comments below. And if you want to keep exploring the powerful forces shaping our world, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss what's next. Can this ship be steered? The Republican Party is not oblivious to this problem. The question is whether or not they can do anything about it. The challenge is monumental, to say the least, because it requires them to solve an impossible puzzle: how to moderate their image and policies to attract independents and young people without alienating the very base that brought them to power. These are signs of an internal struggle. Some strategists understand the need to moderate on certain issues to win over the swing voters, but the party's base is animated by a desire for a hardline approach. Plans like Project 2025, a roadmap for a new conservative administration, call for policies that are deeply unpopular with the moderate center, yet there may be a glimmer of hope for the GOP. The fluidity of independent and Gen Z voters means that their loyalty is not set in stone. They're not ideologically rigid. In fact, independents often hold a mix of positions, favoring Democrats on social issues but Republicans on economy. They want compromise over conflict and are hungry for leaders who prioritize solutions over partisan warfare. This creates an opportunity for a different kind of Republican and Democrat, one who can speak to economic anxieties without resorting to divisive cultural rhetoric. The challenge is that this would require a fundamental change in the Republican DNA. It would mean moving away from the populist anger that has defined it for the last decade and embracing a more pragmatic, big tent vision. It's a path that some Republicans are trying to forge, but they are often drowned out by the louder, more extreme voices that dominate the party's primary elections. Conclusion: the Republican Party is standing on a demographic cliff. The coalition that delivered it power is aging, and the next generation of voters are looking elsewhere. The party's identity, forged in an era of clear partisan lines, is struggling to connect with a massive and growing bloc of Americans who refuse to be defined by a political team. This independent exodus is more than a temporary setback. It's a symptom of a political system that many feel are failing to meet their needs. The rise of the independent voter is a vote of no confidence in both parties. But for the GOP, the rejection by young voters and many moderates seems to be deeper and more structural. The Republican Party is now at a crossroads. One path leads to adapting its message for a new, more diverse, and less partisan electorate, a path that risks a civil war with its own base. The other path leads to doubling down on ideological purity, serving its most loyal supporters while watching its electoral map shrink. The question isn't just, can the GOP survive this trend? But what will they have to become in order to do so? And will it even recognize itself on the other side? Thanks for sticking around, everybody. I love it when you stick around to the end. That's cool. You guys have a great night. Hang in there, everybody. There's more coming.